Let's do a quick, or maybe not so quick, factoring review. We're going to cover several different types of factoring. We're going to start off with common term factoring, and I will tell you that you should always look for a common term. That's always the first thing you should look for, is a common term. So if I'm looking at number 1 here, I see that the common term is a 3. And so I would factor out a 3. And the way I do that is, when I factor that 3 out, I open up a set of parentheses. And what I'm doing when I factor out a 3 is I'm really dividing each term inside by 3. And so 3x squared divided by 3 is x squared. 9 divided by 3, or minus 9 divided by 3, is minus 3. And I'm done. Example 2, I have 2x squared minus 16x to the 4th plus 28x to the 5th. Here we have two different types of common terms. We have numbers. We have a 2 that's going to be a common term when I'm looking at the numbers only. But then when I'm looking at the variable, I have x's in each term as well. So the way this works is I want to take the variable with the lowest power. And so my common term here would be 2x squared, because the square is my lowest power for the x. So I'm really dividing everything by 2x squared. And what I'm left with is 2x squared divided by 2x squared is 1, minus 16x to the 4th divided by 2x squared. Well, 16 divided by 2 is 8. And x to the 4th divided by x squared. Remember, when you're dividing bases that are the same, you subtract the powers. So 4 minus 2 is 2, so that's x squared. Plus 28 divided by 2 is 14. X to the 5 minus 2 is 3. And that's my answer. Continuing on, we have example 3, 3x squared minus y minus 5x y to the 3rd plus 10xy. Looking at the numbers, 3, 5, and 10, there is no common factor other than 1. Looking at the variables, I have an xy here, I have an xy here, and I have an xy here. So I need to take the one with the lowest power. So I have an x squared, I have an x, and I have an x, so I'm going to take out an x, that's the lowest power. I have a y cubed, and a y, so I'm taking out a y. So I'm essentially taking out an xy. So I'm going to divide everything by xy. That's what's happening everywhere when I'm factoring this out. I'm just dividing by that term that I'm factoring out. And I'm left with 3. 2 minus 1 is 1, so I just get an x. Remember, if there's not a power visible there, it has a power of 1. And then y over y, that cancels. Minus 5, x over x cancels. Y over y cancels, so it's just 5. Plus, no, cancel the wrong one. Sorry, let me go back. And then I have the x cancels, but I have 3 minus 1 is 2, so that's going to be a y squared. Then I have 10 plus 10, and then dividing by xy, here they both cancel, and I'm just left with 10, and that is my answer. Just factoring out that common term. Number 4. Whenever you have a negative in front, always pull out that negative. So it looks like between the 2 and the 8, I have a common term of 2, and I am going to pull out that negative 2. Then looking at my x's, my lowest power is 3, so I'm going to pull out a negative 2x cubed. So I'm dividing by 2x cubed everywhere. And so I get, well, negative 2x cubed over negative 2x cubed is 1. And then negative 8 divided by negative 2 is positive 4. and then x over x, so it's 4 minus 3 is 1, so that's just x. So this is my answer. You don't have to write underneath here every time like I'm doing where I'm showing my division. If it helps, do it. If you don't want to, that's fine. Moving on to common factoring. What we have when we're doing some common factoring, common grouping, what we want to do, typically you're going to have 4 terms. And when you have 4 terms, you want to group 2 together. And by grouping 2 together, you can factor out a common term of the 2 that you group together. Let me show you how it works. So in number 1, we've already got them. They've already been grouped, and something's already taken out. Let me do this. Let me skip number 1 for a second, and let me show you how I can get to number 1. Let me just go straight into number 2. First of all, what you typically can do, you can just group the first 2 and the last 2 together. Sometimes it doesn't work. Most of the time it will. And I'll show you how to check to make sure you're on the right track in just a second. When I group these together, the first thing I want to do within each group, I want to look for the common term. In this first group, I've got a 3x squared I can pull out. And when I divide this by 3x squared, I get x. When I divide this by 3x squared, I get plus 4. In my second group, I can pull out a 2, and that's a plus 2, so I'll just, plus 2 meaning positive 2. When I pull out a 2, when I divide, I get x plus 4. And this is when you know you're either on the right track or the wrong track. These 2 sets of parentheses here must be the same. If what you have left in the parentheses is not the same, you need to go back and regroup. Try grouping 2 other terms together to see if you can come up with the same thing. Once you have this and you're on the right track, your parentheses match, this thing that's in parentheses is one part of your answer. And the other part of your answer is what's on the outside. You'll have 3x squared plus 2. And this is your answer. So in doing that, we can go back to example 1 and we now see, well, I've got 2 sets of parentheses here and they match. And both sets have something out front. So it looks like I did have some grouping going on and I've already factored out a common term. And so my answer is, what's in the parentheses is once and then outside, x squared minus 5. And this is my answer here. Example 3, I'm just going to try to group the first 2 and the last 2. So in the first group, I can pull out an x squared. When I divide this by x squared, I get x. When I divide this by x squared, I get plus 1. When I divide this by, well, got to find my common term. Common term here is 2, so I'd pull out a plus 2. When I divide 2x by 2, I get x. When I divide 2 by 2, I get plus 1. What's in parentheses matches, so I'm good to go. So my answer is x plus 1 and x squared plus 2. And that's my answer. Last example for common grouping. Again, I'm going to try to group the first 2 and the last 2. So in this first set, I can take out a 2x squared because looking at the numbers, the common term is 2. Looking at the variables, the one with the lowest power is x squared, so I'll pull out a 2x squared. When I divide 2x cubed by 2x squared, I get x. Again, if you're not seeing how I'm getting this x, you would just want to go back to how I did it on each one of these over here and just show that division if you need to. When I divide minus 10x squared by 2x squared, I get a minus 5. because the x squared cancels, and negative 10 divided by 2 is negative 5. On the second set, I can pull out a common term of plus 3. 3x divided by 3 is x. Negative 15 divided by 3 is minus 5, and I'm good to go because what's in parentheses match. So my answer is x minus 5. And 2x squared plus 3. And I'm done. That's my answer. Remember, when viewing the podcast, you can pause it, you can rewind it. Because when I cancel this screen out, everything's going to disappear when I move down on the page. Trinomial factoring. It says maybe use grouping. This is how I do trinomial factoring. Basically what I use is, it's a method that's called Mustang Factoring. Here's how it works. Very easy. First of all, you should know that the term in front of the coefficient in front of x squared is a. So you would have really ax squared plus or minus bx plus or minus c. Meaning the number in front of x squared is a, the number in front of x is b, and the constant is c. So here, for example 1, I have a is 1, b is negative 7, and c is 10. The first step is multiply a times c. 1 times 10 is 10. Now what I want to do is look at the signs of my answer. This, since it's a plus, means the signs in my factored answer will be the same. And this tells me what they will be. They will be both minuses. So once I have a times c, I need to find the factors of 10. In other words, what two numbers can I multiply together to get 10? I have 10 times 1, 5 times 2, and that's it. So if my signs are the same and they're both negatives, which group of numbers, the minus 10 or the minus 1, the minus 5 and the minus 2, add to negative 7? And the answer is these two. This is my set of numbers here. So after I find my set of numbers, the next thing I want to do is divide by, this is my set, I want to divide by a, which is 1. The next step, if you remember that the x, or the variable you have, goes with the number on bottom, so it's simply 1x minus 5 and 1x minus 2. And that's your factored answer. Second example, x squared plus x minus 12. A is 1, B is 1, C is 12, or minus 12 rather. Here I have a minus. That means my signs will be different. And when the signs are different, this sign over here tells you what your biggest one will be. So my biggest number will be positive. So my next step is a times c, which is negative 12. Now I'll look at all the factors of 12. And here I can forget about this negative sign for now because my signs are taken care of over here. And so I have 12 times 1, 6 times 2, 4 times 3. But if my signs are different and my biggest one is positive, meaning the smaller ones are negative, which set of numbers adds to positive 1? And it's these two. My next step is to divide by a, which is 1. One thing that I forgot to mention on the previous example, after you divide by a, if you can reduce these fractions, do so. Here we cannot. So the variable goes with the number on bottom, x plus 4 and x minus 3. And that's my answer. Number 3. A is 2. B is negative 7. And C is negative 15. And so A times C is negative 30. My signs are going to be different. The biggest one, the biggest sign or the biggest number will be negative. So I look at my factors. I have 30 times 1, 15 times 2, 10 times 3, 6 times 5, and I believe that's all the combinations of multiplying to get 30. If the signs are different and the biggest one is negative, which two add to get me negative 7? And that's these two, negative 10 and positive 3. My next step is to divide by a, which is 2. Remember to reduce these fractions if you can. This reduces to negative 5 over 1. This one stays 3 over 2. Final step, the variable goes to the number on bottom. It's going to be x minus 5. And we have 2x plus 3. That is my answer. And the last example, I'm not going to do examples 5, and this is 8 and 9, but it should be 6 and 7. I'm going to leave those for you to practice. I am going to do example 4. So I have A is 1, B is negative 5, C is 6. First step, A times C is 6. And my signs are going to be the same. They're both going to be negative or minuses. And so look at my factors of 6. I have 6 times 1, 3 times 2. They're both minuses or negatives. So which set adds to negative 5? It's these two. Divide by a, which is 1. And finally, the variable goes with the number on bottom. X minus 3 and x minus 2.